answering Patrick Hines, a hateful creed in its true colours, and G.W. Foote said this. Patrick Hines seems to be very annoyed that people in Western countries are increasingly not buying what he is selling. Should one want to see a fundamentalist Christian at his most vicious, at his most passive aggressive, at his most toxic, then get that person to talk about ex-Christians. A religion that is not a cult, it has a good front door and it has a good back door. A religion that is not a cult, it welcomes people in the front door and it says cheerio to them when they leave via the back door. With cults, it is not so. When one leaves a cult, then he is very often subject to name calling and vituperation. So the fact that Patrick Hines has such a low view of ex-Christians speaks to his being a ringleader in a cult. He is a preacher in a Presbyterian church. G.W. Foote said, a hateful creed in its true colours concerning Charles Haddon Spurgeon. Charles Haddon Spurgeon was a Calvinist extremist Baptist preacher in the 1800s. Now, really, the only difference between Hines and Spurgeon is that Hines believes in ritually drowning. Well, it's not ritual drowning, it's a ceremony that is meant to ape, I mean, in a spiritual way. I mean, as St. Paul says, we are buried in Christ in the waters of baptism. So the ceremony of baptism is a ritual burial. It's like with the Freemasons. I think in one of the higher Scottish Rite degrees, the candidate is pretend murdered, and then King Solomon goes over to him and raises him up. It's like a mock death, and that's what baptism is. Baptisma in Greek means dunking, so you're being dunked under the water, and it is a pretend death. And then, whenever you rise up out of the water, it is like Christ's resurrection. So that anyone would do this to a baby, I find this to be sick. It's a sick thing to do to babies. Charles Haddon Spurgeon was better in this regard. He didn't believe in subjecting babies to this pretend murder, this pretend death, this pretend burial with Jesus Christ. However, even Baptists, they very often baptize extremely young children. But anyhow, so theologically, there is very little difference between what Patrick Hines believes and Spurgeon believes. Indeed, Hines has put up loads of Spurgeon sermons. So what G.W. Foote, who I think led the British Secular Society after Bradlaugh, what Foote said about Spurgeon, in my view, it also applies to Patrick Hines. his first kind of passive aggressive comment. But true story, 50, roughly 57% of people in South Korea have no religion. So atheism and non-religion, what people sometimes refer to as non, None, that is growing in South Korea. Now, I'm sure that there's plenty of frenzy and hullabaloo and emotionalism in South Korea caused by Christianity, but it's not demographically significant. It's no religion that is growing in South Korea. So not only is Christianity dying in America, in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in it is also dying in South Korea. Yes, Christianity is dying in America. This speaks to his Presbyterianism. He was subjected to a mock drowning as a baby. He was baptized as a baby, so Baptists don't do this, but Presbyterians do. He's about to embark here on a no true Scotsman fallacy. Funnily enough, I've never actually been to Scotland. I'm fascinated with Scotland, but unfortunately, I've never actually been there. I'd love to go sometime. A quick aside, but Patrick Hines here is embarking on a no true Scotsman fallacy. He wants to distinguish between true Christianity and false Christianity. However, as Patrick Avalos, not Patrick Avalos, Hector Avalos puts it, there really is no such thing as true Christianity because Christianity is not true. Hector Avalos said one cannot have a true version of a false religion. So there's no such thing as true Christianity to begin with, but Hines here is embarking on the no true Scotsman fallacy. Versions of Christianity that he does not like are false Christianity. So most of Christianity is not, most of American Christianity is not real Christianity, no true Scotsman fallacy. Now, just look at the fanaticism that Christianity causes. He got a letter in the post from a fellow Christian, and he is so annoyed by it that he threw it in the trash can. As Jesus Christ himself said, I came to sow division. I came to bring the sword into the world. I came to set the world on fire, and I wish that it was already ablaze. So, I mean, Christianity is divisive, and this is the reason why it should not be allowed into government. It should not be allowed into government because it is divisive. It divides the world into, it divides the world, it divides the citizenry. Speaking concerning politics, it divides the citizenry into the saved and the lost, into the orthodox and the heretic, into the believer and the infidel, into the true Christian and the false Christian. False Christian. Politics is divisive enough, and that's why there should be. That's why I'm a secularist. There should be no Christianity in government because it is divisive, because it has the citizenry at each other's throats. Theological disputes are not political disputes, which is why I'm a secularist. Yeah, he wants to get everybody together, and this is a bad thing in this version of Christianity. I mean, Christianity is divisive. Yes, unity is a bad thing according to this hateful creed in its true colours. I think the 500th anniversary of the Reformation has already passed. Well, it's not really ignorance, it's that the Christian wars of Europe were extremely deadly. Uh, the Cathars, the Albigensians, they were just completely eradicated because they practiced a false version of Christianity. The 30 Years' War killed about a third of the population of Germany. So they remember this, and this is a reason of ecumenism. Christianity is not taken seriously in the modern world because it is divisive, and if you give Christians secular powers, it is murderous. It causes genocides, it causes whole populations to be obliterated like the Albigensians. I agree with you that Pope Francis's version of Christianity is false, but it's false because Christianity itself is false. This is actually the second uh, video that he gave quoting this passage of scripture. It really annoys him that people don't buy into his hellfire cult. So, however, we shall see that this analogy does not hold. This is a Christianese word. Professor means someone essentially who pretends to be a Christian but is not a real Christian or true Christian. Professor, it's a bit of Christianese. Why should we care what Jesus thinks? According to Bart Ehrman, Jesus Christ was illiterate. According to Hector Avalos, Jesus Christ was biblically illiterate. When Jesus Christ speaks on biblical matters, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So the opinion of Jesus Christ on ex-Christians is really not worth anything. Yeah, as Captain Cassidy says, you weren't Christianing the right way. You didn't believe in the real version of Christianity. You weren't a true Christian. You didn't understand Christianity. That's why you left it. As Captain Cassidy says, in a broken system, Christianity is a broken system. In a broken system, the message is always perfect. If you reject the message of Christianity, it's because you didn't understand it properly. It's not that the message itself was rotten and untrue. As Andrew Seidel puts it, the road to atheism is littered with well-read Bibles. Reading the Bible will actually deconvert you from Christianity. It's shocking, horrible, untrue, ahistorical, pre-scientific garbage. And here is the academic version of what Patrick Hines is about to say from the German Bible Society, the Deutsche Bibelgesellschaft. This will become important in a moment. This is gaslighting. He's he's trying to get you to disbelieve your own experience, and this is gaslighting. I know very well in my own case that I was a Christian. Paul Lucia knows very well that in his own case he was a true Christian, a sincere Christian, someone who dedicated his life to Christianity. So Christians trying to gaslight the people who left their version of the cult. I mean, gaslighting is a cult tactic as well. So Patrick Hines' cult here is scoring very highly when it comes to the Bite model. The Bite model is a way of assessing whether religious movements and religious sects are cults. We don't need to reflect on it because we don't believe in this magic book anymore. Magic book says a thing. That's a non sequitur. That does not follow. That does not follow at all that if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. I mean, that is non sequitur. Non sequitur in non sequitur in Latin means it does not follow. But you know, Patrick Hines here is arguing magic book says a thing. Magic book written 2,000 years ago by God knows who says a thing. No, not therefore, because it does not follow. Does not follow. People leaving a cult proves that they were never a part of that cult to begin with. That is pure craziness. I don't. I personally don't identify as an atheist. However, I will say this: I am strongly atheistic towards Patrick Hines' version of God. I strongly disbelieve in Patrick Hines' version of God. I say strongly, I make the positive claim that Patrick Hines' version of God does not exist. Because magic book says a thing. How do you know that you are a part of the sovereign effectual call of God? Have you seen the book of life, the name that the Lamb has in the book of Revelation with the name of all the elect written in it? Have you seen that book? Do you know for sure that your name's written in that book? If we weren't Christians, then how do you know that you are a Christian? How do you know that you've been sovereignly called by Yahweh and Jesus. You don't know that. This is the other side of the coin uh, of this. They went out from us because they're not of us. If we were never Christians to begin with, you, Patrick Hines, you might not be a Christian yourself. You might just be a professor of Christianity. Because people who believed exactly what you believe have deconverted. It happens all the time. So, how do you know that you are part of the sovereign, effectual call of Jesus Christ? How do you know that you aren't just languishing in evanescent grace? Uh, Evanescent grace is a Calvinist term to mean people who have been partially enlightened by the gospel, who tasted some of the fruits of the Spirit but fell away. Yahweh just does this for his own amusement. He partially elects someone just for the fun of it, but ultimately damns them. How do you know, Patrick Hines, that you aren't languishing in a state of evanescent grace and that you too will be damned by Yahweh's sovereign decree? Magic book says a thing. However, there does seem to be verses in the Bible which seem to say that one can lose their salvation, but I can't think of them at the moment. But it's a trivial point. But the Bible on this issue speaks, as it often does, from both sides of its mouth. But go and see the Skeptic's Annotated Bible for this. Uh, I think that's one of the contradictions that Steve Wells documents. Can you lose your salvation? The message is always perfect in a broken system. If you understood Christianity, you'd still be Christian. Captain Cassidy writes about this quite a bit. Go check her out on onlysky.media. But we were Christian. I mean, you're trying to gaslight us out of our own experience, and as uh, as Paul Gia puts it, I mean, I mean, if you want to grow the church, such gaslighting like this is harming you. You are claiming things that we know with a capital K is untrue because it's our own experience. It's like what Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. We are aware of our own thoughts, we are aware of our own experience, and we are aware that we were Christians. So you trying to gaslight us that we never were Christians to begin with, that is just telling us all that we need to know about your cult, that your cult engages in gaslighting and that we made the right decision in abandoning it. I was a Christian because I knew my own experience. Cogito ergo sum. We don't care what Jesus teaches because we no longer believe in Jesus. Magic rabbi from 2,000 years ago said a thing. Now, Patrick Hines is about to say something that is completely untrue. I've gone through it countless times before. It is a prat, a point refuted 1,000 times. And if you want good refutation of this point, read The Bad Jesus by Hector Avalos. When Jesus said, "You must hate your father and mother," he means what he said. And let us go to the scholarly edition of what he's reading. See this word here, misei? Misei in Greek means hate, and hate means hate. This verse says what it means and means what it says. Misei means hate. In English words like misogyny, that mis is from this Greek word here, misei or miseo, to hate. So Jesus is saying you must hate your father and mother to become uh, his disciple. And I'd like to challenge you, Christians, as the New Testament says, examine yourself to see whether or not you be in the faith. Do you hate your father and mother? If you don't, then you're not Jesus' disciple. Examine yourself to see if you are in the faith. If you don't hate your parents, if you don't even hate your own suke, which means life or soul or mind. If you, I mean, how crazy is this? You must hate your mind or soul or life to become this cult leader's disciple. If you don't hate, if you aren't full of hate, and this is why G.W. Foote is correct, Christianity was conceived in hate, it was conceived in division, it was conceived in hating your family for Jesus' sake. It's a religion conceived in hatred, and Calvinist extremism is a very accurate reflection of this hatred. Okay, I probably won't go on much longer because I was on the computer for quite a lot yesterday and I'm quite tired, but I was triggered by this. Might come back to it at another time, but I'll go on for a little bit more. And because I'm new at StreamYard, I don't even know if the sound is recording properly. I don't want to go for an hour and then, you know, come back and discover that it hasn't recorded properly. So Christians, examine yourself. Do you hate your brothers and sisters? If you don't hate your brothers and sisters, then you are not Christ's disciple. So if Christians are knocking at your door, going soul winning, now make sure that they're real Christians, because you know there's plenty, as Patrick Hines himself says, there's plenty of false Christians going about. So you know, inquire. Do you hate your brother and sister? And if they say no, then they're not true Christians. They're not Jesus' disciples. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. Tell them to get lost because they're not even true Christians to begin with. If I wanted to convert to Christianity and I don't, I would want to convert to true Christianity, not false Christianity. And this is actually how Pilgrim's Progress begins. Christian actually quotes this verse. So Christian abandons his family, goes on adventures, and then drowns himself in the river. And one of the explanations he gives for this is that, you know, you must hate your family for the sake of Jesus. And if the sequel hadn't been released, where Christiana and his children eventually, you know, they themselves drown themselves in the river and then go to the magical sky kingdom, the celestial city. You know, that's where this would have ended. You know, Christian drowned, and I mean, I don't believe that the celestial city exists. So, uh, I mean, there is no city up there in the sky. If you read the Bible, it's a physical sky kingdom that's meant to be up there. That's why Jesus Christ ascended. Ascendo in Latin means to climb up. So there's a physical sky kingdom that's meant to be up there. But, you know, thanks to satellites and telescopes, we know that there's no physical sky kingdom up there. So yeah, so in my view, Christian drowned himself in the river for nothing. He abandoned his family, drowned himself in the river of death because he was deluded. And funny story, what city did Christian abandon? He abandoned the city doomed to destruction. Well, funnily enough, that city is still standing about 400 years later. Pilgrim's Progress was written in the 1600s. So that city doomed to destruction is still there, still chugging away. Jesus uses hyperbole all the time. Verse doesn't mean what it says. Words don't mean what they mean. This is why I extremely dislike apologetics, because words don't mean what they mean whenever the apologist doesn't want those words to mean what they mean. And in my view, this is another form of gaslighting. We've seen the Greek word in the scholarly edition, Misei means hate. If you don't believe that words mean what they mean, then there is a whole chapter in this book, The Bad Jesus. But that such a chapter even had to be written, I mean, it's very damning to Christianity that a whole chapter had to be written to explain why words mean what they mean. It speaks to the Orwellian nature of Christianity, and I must eventually get Christopher Hitchens's book Why Orwell Matters, because I think that Hitchens in that book draws parallels between how religions like Patrick Hines's cult operate and how authoritarian governments operate. So, so Jesus uses hyperbole all the time. Well, how do we know what things Jesus is saying is hyperbole and which isn't? I mean, hyperbole is not a great way to communicate a message. It's actually a terrible way to communicate a message. And I'm not even conceding for a moment that Jesus was being hyperbolic here. So the words don't mean literally what they say, even though we've seen the words, and Messiah means hate. This is an assumption of univocalism because other verses in the Bible, usually written by other authors, say something different. Then that means that this verse doesn't mean what it says. It doesn't mean what it means. Words don't mean what it means in the gaslighting fantasy land of Christian apologetics. Yeah, he quotes Mark and Matthew, to downplay something written in Luke. I mean, you're just assuming univocalism. You're just assuming that the Bible speaks in one voice. Jesus was a deranged cult leader. He said, let the dead bury their dead. And this is completely in keeping with what Jesus wants. He wants total cult fanaticism, total cult devotion, total obedience, and families very often get in the way of cults. So, a good way to stop families from trying to get the children out of a cult is to get the cult member to hate their families. And Jesus knew that, Jesus knew this, and that's why he said it, and that's what it means. He's quoting John so as to downplay something that Luke says. I mean, it just assumes univocalism. It just assumes that the Bible speaks with one voice, when in fact it's extremely contradictory. He doesn't entrust her to John, he entrusts her to the beloved disciple, which, as Richard Carrier rightly points out, was Jesus' boyfriend. I mean, John is depicted as lying on top of Jesus at the Last Supper, lying back on his bosom. You know, the beloved disciple is Jesus' boyfriend. Patrick Hines here is doing head canon. He's he's reading stuff into an indefensible verse so as to make it not indefensible. This is all headcanon. Like, none of this is in the text. Like, in comparison to other people, you must. No, I mean, this is just headcanon in Patrick Hines's disturbed, twisted mind. Is any of this said? Is any of Patrick Hines's ravings said in this text here? Is the word comparison here? No. It just says hate your family or you cannot be my disciple. That's all it says. And hate your own mind as well. Hate your own life. Hate your own soul. Your suke, where we get words like psychiatry. Now, is the word, again, let's let's be biblical. Is the word in comparison here? No, this is all headcanon by Patrick Hines. He's reading these verses, he's reading this stuff into the verse because this verse is indefensible. And this is why I dislike apologetics. Apologetics is defending the indefensible. This is an indefensible verse that a deranged cult leader uttered, and apologists try to defend it by lying about what the verse actually says and means. Again, is any of this in the text? No. This is just deranged headcanon by Hines. That's not what it says. It says, unless you hate your father and mother, brother and sister, and even your own mind slash soul slash life, you cannot be disciple. All this ranting and raving about in comparison and loyalty and all this nonsense, it's not in the text. The text says what it means and means what it says. And if you need to be convinced that a text says what it means and means what it says, you shouldn't even need that. But if you do, because Christianity is such an Orwellian gaslighting religion, if you need convincing that words mean what they mean and say what they say, then read the chapter on this in The Bad Jesus. Okay, Patrick Hines, have you ever borne a heavy wooden implement every day for Jesus? He's making the case that we were never Christians to begin with, but have you done all these things? And the answer is no. I'll come back to this. I'll do a part two because I've actually been here for about 37 minutes and my mind is beginning to wander. But I think I might do a part two. Uh, but this is why, like, responding to apologist videos is so difficult. Like, he's been speaking for 5 minutes, but it has taken me almost 40 minutes to refute it. It's much easier to gish gallop and make rapid fire false claims than it is to refute them. It's really an asymmetric struggle between apologists and counter apologists. So I leave it here and perhaps I'll do a part two because I'm getting a bit tired.